I suppose you're more aware than I am that you are of diminished quantity, that some of your friends have left already. I'm getting a bit of echo. Is that normal? I guess you can figure that out, but I hear a little echo, maybe. One of the things, I'm glad you're already trained in this one. And another one I'd like to perhaps amplify your training in is they want me to go to you when you have a question so that your question goes into the microphone. So if you'll hold up your hand when you have a question or a comment or something like that, I'll do my best to go to you before you start asking your question. I'll try to be quick on my feet. Okay. Sometimes after a weekend, there's a bit of weekend amnesia. So I'd like to remind you of why you're here and what you've been learning. And you've gone through sensory acuity and rapport and perceptual positions. Do these words all have meaning to you? And anchoring. Information gathering, metamodel. How specifically, when specifically, who specifically. Outcome specification, hypnotic language patterns. Milton model, rep systems, or sometimes called modalities, visual, auditory, kinesthetic. Strategies, geo and tote. Those all have meaning to you still? Oh, good. And decision strategies. How much time did you spend on decision strategies? Ooh, now we hit a blank, huh? Did you not do decision strategies?
No, we did.
Oh, you did? Oh, good. That's just deeper in the amnesia. Decision strategies are really very important because if you think about it, everything you do, whether you get mad at somebody or you decide to buy a car, those are all decisions. Whenever you come to a fork in the road and you're going this way or this way, that's a decision. So moment to moment, you make all sorts of decisions, whether to scratch your nose or do something else or stare at the ceiling or pay attention to what's going on up here. Moment to moment, you make all sorts of decisions. So we might circle back on that a little bit. I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry from a long, long time ago, and I couldn't even get into the college now that I used to attend, which was quite a good one at the time. One of the things that chemists, the early chemists struggled because they had all sorts of substances and they played around and they heated stuff up and they reacted stuff together. They didn't know what was going on really. And at a certain point, roughly 100 years ago, give or take, because they discovered them at different times, they discovered that all elements are made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons. This made a world of difference. Suddenly they had a structure that they could use to go, oh, this is what's going on, and that's why these elements are this and so, and this one's similar to this one, and this one reacts similar to this one, and so on. And that's kind of what Bandler and Grinder did with NLP in realizing that all experience is made up of sensory modalities, auditory, visual, kinesthetic. Now we can take them apart. There are a certain number of elements, so to speak, of experience. And you can subtract a feeling and add a different one, or you can subtract one picture and add a different one, visual image. And that made sense out of a whole lot of different things that sages and prophets and various people have sort of stumbled on over the years, just as early chemists did. Well, the next couple of days we're going to enter the land of submodalities. And submodalities are the smaller pieces in the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic systems. And so that's an additional level of ease because submodalities are smaller than modalities, so they're easier to change. It's like you can change one brick in a building quite easily. To change the whole wall made of bricks is a lot harder. So when you change one small submodality, you can make quite a lot of difference, but you can do it very easily. So I love submodalities too, and that's why they let me teach this part, because there's some parts of NLP that they work, they're wonderful, but they're just not quite my style, so to speak. Personally, they don't grab me that much. But being a chemist, this is just like chemistry. So if you hated chemistry in college, you're in trouble. Yeah. But, well, I think we'll have good fun, because it's really not that difficult. You have a list in your notebook of a bunch of different submodalities in the different systems. And I think as I recall, you've gone over a little bit the different qualities of the different systems, but I think I'll review that briefly. The visual system is wonderful for presenting a huge amount of information simultaneously. Bam! We can get a whole bunch of stuff simultaneously. You can change a picture very quickly. The auditory system is sequential, so it's a little hard. It's like finding something on a tape. You know there's something on the tape, but you don't know exactly where, and so you have to kind of go fast forward and back and so on to find it. So auditory is more sequential. The kinesthetic system lasts longer. If you get tired, it takes a while for that tiredness to go away. If you get angry and suddenly realize I made a mistake, that person didn't insult me after all, still the anger's there because your kinesthetic system has all the chemical modulation and all that stuff in there that has to kind of burn down or equilibrate after a while. So the different systems are useful for different things. They're useful in different ways. And they're all useful, but they are useful in different ways. Now, the one thing that I want to be very, very clear about is the differences in the kinesthetic system. I think if you just read through that list of visual and auditory submodalities, it's pretty straightforward. Makes perfect sense. In the kinesthetic system, there's a division that we have to kind of pay attention to because, well, I'll get into that. So in kinesthetic, you have actual skin sensations or tactile. You know, this feels different than this, and this feels different than this, and this is harder, and this is softer, and so on like that. Those are all skin sensations. It's information of the world. It's just like seeing colors and seeing shapes and so on. It's information about what's going on outside. And then we have proprioceptive. It's a fancy name. I found that I can't write and talk at the same time, so sometimes I get a little wild here. That's your internal sense. Your internal sense of relaxation or softness or temperature, cold. Well, that cold is mostly outside. But you can feel the cold in your feet, too. If you ever get your feet cold, it's not just that the cold is outside of your feet. It's that your feet themselves are cold. The muscle sense that tells you, even if I close my eyes, I know where my arm is. I can touch my nose, pretty well. Because I know where my body is. So proprioceptive is the knowledge of yourself. Proprio is the old Latin for self, so it's like self-knowledge or self-sensations. And then there's a quite different one that you've been playing with already, I think, and that's the evaluative kinesthetics. And these are really quite different. These are usually along the midline, in the trunk. Feelings and emotions. Maybe I'll put those down. Sadness, anger, congruence, incongruence, etc., etc. And these are feelings about things. They're very, very different. And they're wonderful, they're important, they organize our behavior, they motivate us, they get us going, they tell us what's important about things. But they're not information of the world, they're information about what we sense. And they're very, very different. So we use these as measures of success or in change work and so on. If you make some kind of change and a person feels better, that's a wonderful indication that what you did is aligned with their outcomes and what they want to have happen. But if you just try to change feelings directly, it's real hard. Somebody's insulted you, and you just try to change the feelings about it, it's real hard. Now, if you change your evaluation so that if you change the way that you evaluate Oh, he was just giving me feedback. Oh, he was just being frank. Or, oh, he's just one of those people who's just very, very honest no matter whether someone feels good about it or not. That changes how you evaluate, and that can change the feelings. But to just try and change the feelings directly is very hard. Any questions about this? I think it's pretty straightforward, but it's a real important distinction. Yes, thank you.
Hot and cold, if it's just on the outside, like a stove, would that be tactile? If it's in the inside, or is it always proprioceptive with temperature?
Well, I wouldn't worry too much about that. It's just that this is information of the world, or information from the world, including your internal world, of your body and so on. It's just information. And see, two people can be having the same information about the world. Two people can be out skiing, for instance, and they both feel the snow in their cheeks and the wind and the cold and the sounds of the skiing and so on. And one person can love it and one person can hate it. So even with the same things here, with a different personality, for want of a better word, or different internal organization, one person can have a big plus here, one person can have a big minus. These tend to be fairly simple, and another thing about these is that there are very few of them. A person can distinguish some 6 million different colors and shades. You know, if you go into a paint store and you get those little chips because you want to paint your bathroom a color, and you put those chips side by side, people can make 6 million distinctions of color alone. That's not including shape and distance and all the other distinctions that we make visually. If you ask people about feelings and emotions, how many feelings and emotions do you think you have? If you were to write down a list, anger, sadness, depression, how many would you get? Not very many. Most people get pretty, they start struggling at 30, and usually by 50 they're totally exhausted. It's like, I thought of every emotion I've ever felt in my entire life. So these are fairly crude distinctions, and someone who focuses a lot on their feelings and emotions typically is what we call a large chunker, or someone who lumps things together. Now that's wonderful. If you didn't have these, your life could be very scattered. There would be lots of different responses to different situations, but there wouldn't be a way to unify them. So these are wonderful for unifying things. And the people, mystics and prophets and people who are speaking of things like enlightenment, often speak in terms of feelings, because that's wonderful. Rumi, for instance, is always about feelings. That's a way to put the world together. Visual is a way to take the world apart. Engineers and scientists are typically very visual, and they slice. They go, that's blue, that's gray, that's a light blue-gray. And you make lots and lots of distinctions, and that's wonderful too. Because if you didn't have lots of distinctions, you might try to eat the carpet instead of what's on the table. I mean, really, it's important. Some people lose this ability. There's a guy, Oliver Sacks has a book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And he literally would try to take his wife and put her on his head. He had brain injury, and he did not make that distinction anymore. He just really didn't understand. And so they're both valuable, and it's a question of when are they valuable, and in context, do you want to put things together, or do you want to make smaller distinctions? Okay. The next thing I want you to do is explore a little bit with these submodalities, and I want you to do it in the following way. I'd like to have two people come up here very briefly, and it's like no personal exposure or anything like that, just to demonstrate the exercise. Could I have just two people quick? Okay, great. One other? Sure. Come on up. So, one of you sit down, and one of you will have to stand, I'm afraid. So, Ken, go ahead. Or I guess you could sit here, and I could stand over here. Okay. Now, this is also in your, excuse me. But basically, it's very simple. We get together, the three of us, and one of us, let's say I'm the first one, and I look down at the list and I go, transparency. I haven't played with that much. I don't know much about that. Let's do transparency. Then we all close our eyes, and we pick some innocuous experience, like, how your front porch looks like, or something that doesn't have a lot of emotion, because if you have a lot of emotion, then you'll get other factors coming in. So just some kind of ordinary thing, or how your office looks, or your living room, or maybe a special, special view that you just kind of pleasant, mildly pleasant, but nothing big emotional stuff. And then just try with transparency. You look at your image and you go, okay, there's my front door. What happens if I make it transparent? Make the image transparent. And then make it opaque again. So go back and forth between being opaque and transparent. And that's long enough, probably. And then we get back and we talk about, well, what is it like to make it transparent? And we don't use content. Don't tell me what you see in the image.
More empty and more open.
More empty and more open. Okay. How about you, Ken?
It was just a little bit shocking. I was imagining walking up and there's a transparent steel door there.
Transparent steel. You have a real steel door in your house?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Transparent steel. So it was surprising, right? Now, once you got over the surprise is a temporary thing. It's the unexpected, right? Once you get over the surprise, what is it like to have it transparent and see right through the door?
It's kind of neat.
Kind of interesting, huh? Does the door seem a little less substantial?
It's kind of like the bubble wrap on a toy, that plastic.
Yeah, you
that
just see through.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of neat.
Okay. And how about you? Do you have anything else to offer?
It didn't seem that important.
Didn't seem as important.
Yeah.
And if you use a different set of words, what would you say?
It was. I used the door, and it was. I could just see into the room a lot better, and it made. The place didn't seem nearly as closed off. It seemed a lot bigger. The door seemed pretty empty and all.
Okay. The door was less of a barrier.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So because you can see right through it. Yeah. Often people say with transparency it makes it less real, because if you look at something and it's solid and it looks like it looks in real life, it kind of makes sense. And transparent, it's like kind of a ghost or a wraith or something like that. Makes it less real. Now, one thing I want you to be thinking about, you don't have to talk about it if you don't want to, but kind of be thinking, where could this be useful? Let's say somebody's traumatized and they get these images of past disasters. If you made them transparent, maybe, depends on the person, maybe you could make them less real and therefore less impactful. Okay? Then I'm taking longer here than I want you to do in the exercise. So then I pass the hat. So Matt's the next one. He looks down at the list. He goes, well, let's try this one. And so we all three try it, and then we just kind of share again and just keep going. And I'd like to do this for about 15, possibly 20 minutes. I'll see how much fun you're having. Okay? Great. Go for it.
Steve.
Okay, the first generalization is, did you notice that it made some difference? Is there anyone who didn't find any difference? Okay, I mean, some of them might have been more stronger than others, and some of them might have been a kind of ho-hum. But it does make a difference, right? So this is another way that you can gain some control over your experience. If you're in some kind of experience that you don't like, or you'd like it to be different, there's always the generative possibility that you're kind of in a ho-hum thing and you want to get excited or really interested or you want to get motivated or something. This is another way for you to gain some control over experience. And I use control in the gentle sense of the word. There's always the coercion control, I force you to do something. And we don't usually recommend that because usually that means you're incongruent. That one part of you is trying to force another part of you into doing something. But assuming that you're congruent about your outcome, this is a way that you can change your state and move on in a way that works better for you. Now, there was one of the distinctions on there that I didn't really explain. I kind of lost track of the fact that you probably hadn't talked about it too much. Dissociation and association. You've learned this under a different set of words. If I'm in self position, that's associated. So I'm associated into myself in this moment, I'm looking out at you and so on. If I become the other person, that's associating into the other person and dissociating from your self position. So you're both associating and dissociating. So the question is always, what are you associating into? What are you dissociating from? And the observer, this is pretty much dissociation. Now, you can also think about this as being associated into the position of a dissociated observer. Right? So they're just words, and as long as we know what they mean, words are very slippery. I have a fantasy that 1,000 years from now our words might be as precise as a scientist's in all respects. And that would mean that each word would have only one meaning. Unless you wanted to go into poetry mode. And there would be some signal, I am going into poetry mode now, or creativity mode where words can mean many, many different things at once. I don't know if this will ever happen, but just realize that words are slippery, and of course it just depends on what meaning this other person makes from your words. Is that clear about association and dissociation? Now, there was another thing in there that was a little confusing to some people, and that is the distinction between digital and analog. This is a digital distinction. You're either associated here, or maybe some other observer position, somewhere else in space, or you're associated to the other person. It's a little hard to be both associated into yourself and associated into somebody else. That's like sort of standing between two chairs. You're not really on either one. So it doesn't really exist. Now, an analog submodality is something like closeness. Something can be very, very close so that it's right here, or it can be out in infinity. And so there's an infinite gradation of closeness. And many submodalities are analog and a few are digital. A movie is digitally different than a still picture. You could have a slow movie or a fast movie. That would be an analog distinction, one that changes over a range. A digital is one that is either or. Black and white and color. You can have degrees of color. If you have color, you can have anything from pastel colors to bright, flashing neon colors. But if there's no color, then it's black and white, and that's a digital distinction between those two. And they're important in a lot of ways because it's easy to make an analog distinction, analog change. You can make a picture a little bit brighter, or a little bit softer, a little bit closer. That's usually very, very easy. To jump from one, in a digital distinction, you have to kind of jump from one into another. It's like jumping across a stream. You can't be in the middle. You're either on one side or you're on the other. Now, those are also useful because they can be used to lock in a change. You can make some analog changes, and then with them you make a digital change, and clunk, oh, okay. And that makes it harder to slip back into the old way of being. So digital and analog are both useful, again, in different ways, and it's just nice to make a distinction so that you know what you're doing and how this is going to work. Any question?
No.
Oh, I was in your way, probably. Okay.
Just trying to imagine.
Oh, good. Well, that's wonderful. There's a theory now that language began with hand gestures. And I won't go into the details of it, but there's indication now that the original language was like sign language that deaf people use. And only gradually did words and noises connect with these kind of things. Because lower animals do lots of gesturing and lots of movements with their hands. And there's also brain research to suggest that too. So it's wonderful. Oh, there's another piece of research to ask people to think. And one condition is that they can't move their hands. And most people cannot think as well if they can't move their hands. Now, y'all know about this one?
Especially if you're Italian.
Well, if you're Italian, you're completely lost. Yeah, there's a joke about the Italian and the German trying to converse, and the German's making lots and lots of pictures, and the Italian keeps knocking them away. There's another one. Here's a test. Imagine describing a spiral staircase to someone without using your hands. I mean, that's a real test, isn't it? And it's an example of how easy it is to go, spiral staircase, like something like that. But if you can't use your hands, you have to use a lot of words, and it doesn't really come out very well. So that's wonderful. Please continue. And I misunderstood your gesture. Yes?
Just comment I have.
Okay.
I am kind of person who's
You're the kind of person who doesn't use your hands at all, right?
my friend, they try to rub my head in the chair.
Yeah.
And they tell me talk. So
Yeah.
I was
Still moving. Yeah. Well, what is it? Communication is redundant, huh? Okay, someone had a question here. Yes.
I just want to make sure wet, dry, on, off, black, white, that's digital.
Yes.
Right? Okay, in,
Right.
out. Okay.
Mathematics describes it as a step function. That a digital thing is something where you go like this and then and you change, like an ordinary light switch. Analog is something where there's some kind of variation. It need not be a straight line or a circle or anything else, but there's some kind of variation where you can move along the continuum. It's very easy to move a little distance here. This is like jumping off a cliff. And so you're either here or you're there. And this becomes particularly important in certain kinds of people. Some people have beliefs that are very digital. And it's very hard to change them because it's scary. Because it's like jumping off a cliff. It's like, if I don't have that belief anymore, what do I have? Where some people's beliefs are more analog, yeah. And then it's easier to come, well, a little more, a little less. Science is more like this. Well, we kind of think that electrons are blah, 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 but we don't really know. Rather than, this is the way. It's a very different kind of mind orientation, and it takes different tools to work with it if you want to make some changes.
Excuse me, can we compare analog to color views?
Yes, sure. Yeah, there's a continuous change of color across the spectrum. Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes we impose digital words on it. We say red and orange. But if you look at the spectrum, where do you decide where red stops and orange begins? So for our convenience, we often make digital distinctions between, say, childhood and adulthood. Well, when do you stop being a child? When do you start being an adult? Me too. Me too. Years ago, I decided, there are no adults. They're only children. There are children pretending to be adults. And there are some children who have forgotten that they're children pretending to be adults. Well, that's a little bit of an aside, but now there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and then I'll take a couple of questions. Where did I made a diagram. Let's do an experiment first. Think of something you could easily be afraid of, like a snarling dog or I don't know, scorpions or tarantulas or whatever suits your fancy. A truck bearing down on you. All got something? And you don't have to share it. Now, I want you to imagine that you start with an image that is about that big of whatever it is you're afraid of. And notice your feelings as you imagine an image this big of what you're afraid of. Okay? And now I want you to fairly gradually, kind of look at my hands a little bit, very gradually make it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And keep going. Well, it's bigger than this room, bigger than Winter Park, bigger, 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 bigger than the known universe. And notice how your feelings shift along the way.
We don't exist anymore to feel.
Well, hold on for just a moment. I want everybody to have a chance at this. Now, if you I tried to demonstrate it as you were doing it. If that was confusing to you, take a moment now and just do it again on your own. So you make that real small thing, and then you make it bigger, 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 until it's way out beyond Saturn, the size of it. Okay. Now, how do your feelings change when you do that? Let me just, for the simplicity, I'm going to say what most people feel, and then if you feel something different, let me know and we'll discuss it. For most people, it goes something like this. When it's very, very, if this is intensity of fear in this case, because I've chosen something you're afraid of, and this is size going this way, then initially, when it's real, real tiny, you probably don't have any feelings at all. It's like a fly speck or a little piece of fluff or something like that. So you have essentially no feelings at all for a while. Then at a certain point, you start getting scared. Is that right? And that gets more and more intense for a certain time. And then at a certain point, something changes and you have a different feeling. A different feeling takes over. Is that right? Feeling of joke or unreality or ridiculous or something like that? Is that? Now, does anybody have anything different than that? This is the usual. So essentially what you've got is you've got three different regions here. And there's a threshold that at a certain point, you know, depending on what it is, if it's a schnauzer that's this big, probably isn't very scary, but if it's a tarantula, maybe it would be. I don't know. It'll depend on content. But at some point, you go from essentially zero fear to something you call fear, and then that changes in intensity. And at a certain point, you have something else, and it could be humor. You could have lots of different words for it, but humor or unreality or something. But it's a very different kind of feeling, right? Now, when you explore submodalities like size, I'm supposed to keep this off the camera. Often, the relation will only work in a certain range. But if you have something like size or brightness, if you make it too big or too bright, it will give you a whole different response. And that's important in what some of the things that we'll be doing later, because we'll be utilizing submodalities to change your response in a particular situation. Now, just staying with this for a moment, you all picked something you could be afraid of, right? Just imagine it the way it would occur in real life now, and notice if your feeling's any different than it used to be.
Can you repeat again?
Imagine, let's say I was afraid of dogs. And now I would like you to then imagine a dog, a snarling dog, life-size, and see if your experience is the same as it was before we did this little experiment. Because for some people it will change. Not everybody. But for some people it will change. And this is a very, very fast way to deal with some people's fears. Or other responses, like wanting to drink alcohol, or many, many other things, where there's a very sort of rigid kind of response curve to size of something. Like a friend of mine worked with a guy who was an alcoholic, and when he had the urge to drink, he saw a martini about 7 feet tall, a little taller than he was, and he really, that really drew his attention and would lead him to drink. Now this was a piece to use. It wasn't the solution, but it was a piece to start getting a handle on his uncontrollable desires. Okay, any questions about this? This is called a threshold. Most submodalities will have some kind of threshold. If a picture is very, very dim, or very, very far away, or very, very small, you have no response whatsoever. And that means that if you have some kind of image that the person is being tortured by, and you make it small enough, or far enough away, or dim enough, or colorless, or something like that, it won't matter to them anymore. They still have the image. And these are process instructions. That's the lovely thing about submodalities, is they have to do with process. You're not changing the dog, the snarling dog, into a dog that's wagging its tail. That would be a change of content. And for years, for 100 years, most psychotherapy and personal change have been directed at changing content. changing that picture to something else or changing that sound into something else. And this is just changing process variables, the size, the color, and so on. Now another generalization I want to offer you is that in general, there are exceptions, the more an image or a sound or a feeling corresponds to what you would feel in the real world, the more real it is. Makes sense? Okay? But, and then you can actually exaggerate that by making it bigger than real. If you're within this range, you can increase the response. So these are ways of kind of getting a hold of responses and giving you some control over them. Driving your own bus, Richard Bandler used to say. Most people are like they're in the back of a bus and there's a madman in front of the bus. And the madman is going down the road like this, you know. Most people don't have much control over their state. They get angry, they get sad, they fall in love, and these are all things that happen to them rather than being something that's directed. Okay? Any questions about the exercise or some of these things that I've talked about here? Both this and this. Okay, let's roll right on then. We've got a lot to do. If we get it all done, we can do something else.
Excuse me.
Yes?
What about hot tempered, let's say? We take the example of hot tempered. Can we use this?
I'm missing the word. What's that?
Hot tempered. Depending whatever you say, you just say. Some people are very hot tempered.
Hot-tempered, got it. Okay, yeah. Well, hot-tempered is reaching a threshold very, very quickly, and then rather than going like this, people go like that, right? Sure, you can use this kind of thing with that, and we will. We'll be teaching a number of specific things. This is right now. I'm introducing the basic sort of foundation of submodalities. How do they work? And then we're going to start teaching specific ways to do them. Okay? All right, the next thing I want to do is, well, I'll demonstrate first. Who would like to come up? You don't have to say anything or do anything, just kind of be up here.
Is it something you're scared of?
I'm sorry? No. Nothing like that. I just want to demonstrate the nonverbal aspects of submodalities, that just as you gesture with your hands and you do, there are nonverbal signals that indicate when people are making a submodality shift. That's what I'd like to demonstrate. So who'd like to come up and be my person? Okay, great. Thank you. Can you sit there? Is that all right? Your feet won't quite reach. Is that all right? Oh, good. Oh, good. It won't be very long. Okay, I'd like you to think of something that's neutral. Your home, you know, an image of your home or something like that. And get that image. Yeah, close your eyes. Get that image. And I want you to watch her movements, especially head and upper torso and so on. And I'd like you to then make that image very large. And you don't need to nod or anything. Just make it large and then make it very small. Okay, that's large, right? Okay, now make it very small. Okay, you see the change? Isn't that interesting? This is mind-reading training.
What
Okay.
did you see? I get up, but it's a negative.
Yeah.
Try to take it all in.
Yeah. Well, think about it. If something is small, you kind of need to go like that to see it better. And so these are the motor responses that go along with this experience in the real world. If something's very large, you kind of want to get back a little bit so you can see it all. Okay, so get the same image now, and we'll do
Not
some.
or small or natural.
No, just regular.
Regular.
Back to regular. We'll always start with regular.
Okay.
Okay. And this time make it very bright. Remember, you don't have to say mm-hmm.
Okay.
We can see your mm-hmm. Okay, so again, start regular, and then make it bright. Okay, and then make it very dim. Okay, that's a little subtler. Different people will demonstrate different ones more or less. Let's do it again. So just see that image, and just see the image regular, and then make it very bright. See, it's a different kind of head movement. It's more of a roll. I've done this before, so I know what to look for. So I'm cheating. But it's more of a roll like this, and then make it very dim. And again, this kind of a roll down. So it's this kind of movement. Whereas before it was that kind. Okay. Now, again, start with the regular one. And this time, are you associated into it now? Mm-hmm. Okay, then dissociate. Pull yourself out of that picture. Okay, do you see that one? Mm-hmm. That's more the whole body. The shoulders move back, the whole head moves back. It kind of moves like straight back. So it's not the roll. It's a little different than the size. Okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to get in groups of 3, and there's a long list of submodality things. So some of the ones that are particularly interesting. And notice. Oh, let's do one more. Okay. We don't quite know what you're looking at, and this might or might not be useful. But we'll try. So, is it a still picture now? The image that you're looking at? Mm-hmm. What if you made it into a moving picture? That might or might not be very appropriate. If it was just a house, the house wouldn't move. Yeah. But you could see some wind and in the trees or something like that you could make it into a movie. Or something like that. Or the curtains fluttering or something like that. Okay? And then make it back into a still. And then into a movie again. Well, I don't see much difference here. Often people, particularly if it's something that is moving, like another human being or a party or something like that, they make it into a still, their body becomes very still. And when it's a moving picture, usually their body will move more. There's various different kind of movements that would be appropriate. Okay, thanks very much. Okay. So this is what I'd like you to, let me outline the exercise, and then if you have a question, I'll go for it. Basically, the 3 of you get an exercise in a thing. One of you will be as Amal was, and the other 2, one of you kind of give instructions, and the other one kind of sit back and watch the whole thing. Because it's interesting to watch the person who's giving the instructions and watch how their thing shifts as they start thinking about the shift that they're going to offer the other person. Okay? So this makes it more interesting. You all 3 can have fun. And just take different ones like that, and you be the instructor, and just say, okay, get that image, and then make it larger, make it smaller, make it closer and far, and so on. And notice the nonverbal information that you get back. It's a beginning of training. This is something you can never get perfect at. You can only practice, and eventually you get to Carnegie Hall. Okay, you had a question.
Just like a small comment, there was a very big difference in eye movement.
Eye movements,
Yeah,
okay.
it was like really...
What did you notice?
Well, when the picture goes bigger or more color, or when it goes up, it just goes very rapid.
Oh, a lot of movement.
Yeah, a lot more. When
Okay.
dimmer or smaller, it's like very slow.
Okay. Sometimes you can actually distinguish changes in the pupil size as well. That if you're focusing on something close, your focus is different. You know, sometimes you can tell if someone's looking at you or they're looking past you. Like right now, I'm looking. You can tell, right? And so the actual, of course, that's with eyes open. And you can try this with eyes open as well as eyes closed. So these are ways of distinguishing what someone's doing inside without asking them. And that can be often very useful. It can be particularly useful in corroborating. Let's say somebody says something, and you notice by their head movements or something, they seem to be doing something different. That might be a good time to ask them a little more and find out if something else is going on. But anyway, it's another avenue of communication that, just like eye accessing cues, you can use in getting some idea of what someone else is doing inside and how it might be useful to shift it. Any questions about the exercise? Again, take about 15 minutes. Oh, let's add a break too. I keep forgetting about breaks. I get inspired and I forget. Let's take a 10-minute break first, and then a 15-minute exercise. So I'll see you in 25 minutes. What happened? Did you figure it out?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't know what that is, but I guess it doesn't matter. Okay. Do you have any questions about the exercise or about submodality shifts and noticing them from the outside? Yes.
Sometimes when, for example, when we had him imagine it smaller, he was doing it with his eyes open and his eyes went down as if it were smaller.
Uh-huh.
Is that a conflict with normally when you're imagining something visually that your eyes would go up to visually construct?
It's an alternative. Some people, you ask them to visualize something, they'll go up like that, or like that. And other people will defocus in place. Usually people who are very adept in the visual system will not make deliberate eye accessing cues, but will just change in focus or direction of gaze, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
My partners had a pretty hard time determining when I was doing the changes.
Okay. Well, some people are more expressive than others, and I have a hunch. Does that fit with other things that people have told you?
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay. And, some cultures are less expressive than others. Some cultures, we taught a group of Swedes once, and they were very unexpressive. And on the other hand, if I go to South America, it's a whole different thing, I mean, it really is, because different cultures have different, they're not really rules, but they're preferences, let's say, for how expressive you can be. And when I was in Sweden many, many years ago, they had a outdoor museum, and they had a home there that had been moved from northern Sweden to this museum, but the home was about 400 years old. It was a log cabin. And the whole house was about this big, and they had, the parents and 5 kids in this house. And I have a hunch that cold northern climate, where you have to be indoors so much. I mean, if you put 7 South Americans in that cabin, 5 of them would be dead before the end of winter, because they're so expressive and so emotional and so on. So I have a hunch that there's some historical backgrounds like that. But I don't know. That's just a guess.
I felt the movement more inside than they felt it outside.
Okay.
Like spinning my head or going.
Okay, great. And that's another way you can go about this. If you sort of forget, remember, this is just an exercise for you to use. And ideally you use this with whoever's in front of you, right? Notice how did they respond, and some will respond more, some less. There are some generalizations, and I'll offer you a couple of those. I've offered you one already, that if something is more or less real, life size and life color and so on, it tends to be more real and therefore more convincing, although you can amplify that. But ultimately we want you to pay attention to whoever's in front of you. And a lot of you were noticing a lot of things that I didn't mention: breathing shifts, movement shifts, facial color shifts, things like that. That's wonderful. That means you're paying attention. And you see, the generalizations will always fail somewhere, because everybody's different. So if you have the acuity to notice, how does this person shift when they're doing things, that's the information you really need to know. Generalizations can be useful. Now, one generalization I'll offer you is that the movements, especially, are the movements that you would make in a real situation if that were occurring. So if you're watching a movie, you'll be more animated. If you want to see something in 3D, imagine your body is very still right now at this moment, and you wanted to make what you're seeing at this moment more 3D. What would you do? Yeah, she's demonstrating it. You move your head. Try moving your head a little bit. You move your head a little bit. Suddenly things become much more 3D than if you're very still. So another way of going about it is what you did, is do the shift yourself and notice your internal shifts, or notice the own movements of your own body, or the changes in your own body. And you can learn a lot that way as well. So you can learn externally, you can learn internally. It's Same game. Any other questions about this? Or anything that we've covered so far? Mm-hmm.
I noticed with the sound, when it got louder,
Yeah.
I felt like I wanted people to know.
You want to make it louder and louder?
Yes, well, my guy kept making it louder.
Mhm.
I felt like I was like...
Oh, I see. Your body was going
going
up.
up. And then as it
Interesting.
became a little softer, I went down back.
Okay.
So it felt like that.
I see. Good. Good sound. Yeah, I demonstrated mostly visual ones, and I apologize for that. I meant you to explore all of them. I hope some of you did. If not, you know what to do. You know how to do it.
If people go back and forward in time into their generalization that past is to the left and future is to the right.
For most people, if they're normally organized, yeah. You've had the accessing cues already, right? You know, visual construct, visual remember, so on. Yeah, for most people, you construct your future. It hasn't happened yet. And so you put that over in the construct, usually. Some people are reversed. Some people have their visual construct over here. And so then they need to go over there to construct a future. And some people are see their future in visual remembered images. And that is not so good. That means your future is very fixed, because those images tend not to change as much. You're not using the part of your brain that is adept at making things different. And so people then tend to have a very fixed future, and it can be useful to reverse their timeline. But that's master track, so I'm not going to say any more about that. But timelines are very, very important. They're very, very useful. How do you have your experience of time? Okay, anything else about what we've done so far? Okay. And I forgot to mention, in terms of people who volunteer to demonstrate, particularly from now on, I'd prefer to have people who haven't been up here before, so we get some more variety. But I leave that to you, and I don't know who's been up here before, so it's not going to be up to you. But that's my preference. The next thing I want to demonstrate is how to use submodalities, essentially as anchors, to take a problem state into a resource set of submodalities. And so I'd like to have someone who has a problem state. You don't have to tell me what it is, just that you have one. And then select a resource state. We'll explore the submodalities of both, and then show you how to use submodalities to transform one into the other. Well, she's first. Come on up. She had her hand up first, so maybe you're next. If you want to be next.
On.
Okay. Now, this is remember these are these kinesthetic evaluative. So these are going to be the result of the problem. So these are something that we're going to watch and notice how they change when we make some changes later. But we're not going to change these directly. Okay.
And then
What are the differences?
auditory. Not a whole lot of sound in the problem.
Okay.
Kind of, let's go to the resource. Resource is the full sound, like panoramic sound.
Okay.
Dolby Digital, like wow, I think that's great. And then the problem is, like, I've got earwax in my ears. I just don't hear very well.
Is it like blurry sound as well?
It's not blurry, it's more muffled.
Muffled, good. Okay.
Thank you.
And again, the words don't matter except they matter to her. So we want to use whatever words fit with her experience. Okay, now I bet you got some more than that.
Okay.
Take a look at those two experiences again. What other differences can you...
Well, the problem state would be slow thinking.
Slow tempo?
Slow tempo.
Okay. And this one's faster?
No, not faster.
Smooth.
Real time.
Real time. Okay. So this is slower than real.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. What other differences? We got color, black and white,
Right.
movie still.
The color and the picture, it's all part of that blurry, that agitated state, that problem state is just, it's more kinesthetic. There's not a whole lot of visualization going on.
Okay.
There's not a lot of choices. I'm not presenting myself with a lot of
Right.
choices.
Stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not wanting to be there.
Right. Sure. That's all part of
Right.
this one here.
Right.
Okay. That's the response to it.
Okay.
So
Some more feelings.
now, feelings. I'm interested in feelings if there's somehow feelings of, like, for instance, in the resource state, you probably have bodily feelings. Right?
Yeah.
The tactile,
Sure.
receptive. Do you have any of those in the problem?
Yeah, clammy.
Okay.
Hands, clammy. Short breaths. Or no breathing. Holding your breath.
Okay.
Even though I am breathing, it doesn't
You're
feel like I am.
Let's okay. Hold breath.
Okay.
How's that? Okay, and over here you're breathing easily, probably.
Deeper.
Deeper. Okay. And clammy over here, and
It's
there's not much tactile.
No, it's just like a breeze. You feel like
I'm sorry.
light.
Light. Okay. And again, we could get lots more words. We could get it much more specific if we wanted to. But if I say light, she knows what I mean, right? Because it's her word. Okay. Any other differences? And in particular, I want to ask about one. If you imagine these two at the same time, is there any difference in location? In your personal space? Like one picture's over here.
Yes.
Over here.
Tremendous.
Okay. And where?
The problem is very oppressive. There's not a lot of space. My circle space is very tight in the
Okay.
problem state.
Okay. It's not quite what I was asking, but it's good information. So tight, and then over here
It's
would
just
be
wide open.
wide open, like panoramic, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. That's something a little different.
What were you looking for?
If I think of a particular problem state that I can think of, problem state is over here, resource is over here. But take the two images simultaneously. Do you have anything like that? Are you perhaps fully associated to both?
Yeah.
One at a time, right?
One at a time.
Okay, so there's no difference there. You're fully associated. So that's something that's the same in both of these, so we're not interested. We're only interested in differences.
Okay.
Take one more look, and one more feel, and one more hear. And is there any other difference? We've got quite a few differences already.
Yeah, one is in black and white and the other is in color.
Ooh, okay. That's a big one. I assume that the problem is
It's
black
in black and white.
Okay.
Or gray.
Sure. Shades of black and white.
Sure.
Okay, and the other is in color. Okay, great. Now, I just want to pause to comment for a little while, so you can just take it easy. If you look at this list of things, this one is much richer. It has color, it has clear focus, it has more information. If you could look at her picture of this, there would be lots of detail. There would be lots of distinctions, lots of information. If you look at this one, not much information. And in general, resource states have much more information in terms of submodalities. We didn't ask about movie and still. You checked for movie and still. This one, well, you said this one was slow tempo.
Very slow.
Like a slow movie?
Yeah.
Okay,
Very slow.
this is a regular real. Okay, we did get that. Okay. So, now I want you to add, if any of you are looking, I actually prefer that you don't look at the notes right now, but if you are looking at the notes, I'm adding another step. What I'd like you to do is take this problem state and pick just one of these to change, and notice to what extent it makes a difference in terms of shifting the problem content. You keep the content the same, whatever the situation is, in terms of shifting it toward a resource. So if you just think of the problem situation right now, I'll assist you doing this, so you don't have to look up here. Think of the problem situation again, and what if you just change that black, white, and gray into color? It makes a difference.
It made a big difference.
Okay. Now go back to the problem state.
Okay.
And now just clear up the focus. Just imagine you had like a camera and you were just twiddling the dial and you just cleared up the focus.
Okay. On there.
That made probably not quite as much difference, is that right?
The color did.
Yeah, the color did a lot. Okay, let's try another one. So go back to the original problem state. And now you hear those muffled sounds?
Mm-hmm.
And then have them become clearer, just like focusing the sounds, and have them become panoramic all around you.
Yeah, that made a difference
That
too.
made quite a difference.
Yeah, because I now stepped back from it.
Okay.
And could see and hear.
Okay. And that's one of the things I didn't emphasize earlier, that sometimes you change one submodality, it will change another.
Yeah.
So for her, changing the sound changed association to dissociation, so she could kind of step back out of it a little bit. Okay? Now let's go back to the problem situation again. Okay, and now you had the slow tempo in that one, and what if you gradually speed it up to real time?
That really worked too.
Okay, that makes a difference as well.
It does. It did, yeah.
Okay, great. And, well, I think that's great. Now,
I do too.
Thank
you.
We're not done yet. This is just experimentation. And this is a wonderful thing to do, to educate yourself about how these things shift. And people are different. Some people respond much more to some, much more than others to others. You find out, how does this person respond? Now we want to go for the whole shot. Go for the gusto, okay?
All right.
So stay with that, you start with that uncomfortable situation.
Okay. Back to the original.
The original. Mm-hmm. Now change the black, white, and gray into color. And then change that blurriness to clear focus. Allow that clear focus to emerge. And the muffled sounds become panoramic and clear. And speed up that slow tempo into real time. And just stay with that experience, using these more resourceful submodalities to give you more information about that problem situation. Can you say what that's like now?
Yes, it's like I have the experience that I'm experiencing more for what it is, and rather being associated, I'm more in an anticipatory. I can like anticipate
Okay.
rather
Means
than.
you can plan, or you can.
Yes, exactly. I can plan my response and see what it is for what it is.
Okay.
And that's exciting. It's like, wow.
Feel a little more resourceful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in this altered once problem state, do you have some sense of where a solution might lie, or what direction you might go to move toward a solution, or anything like that?
Specifically, it's buying me time. I bought myself time to anticipate, to determine how am I going to respond.
Okay, which presupposes you have some choice in response.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly, which is what my resource state gives me.
How do you experience this sense of choice in responding? Do you have images of different things you can do that you can think about and consider?
Yeah, choices of, well, if I say this, this may happen. If I say this, that may happen. And I'm in the driver's seat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, me too.
Now, if you can, one last, I want to test a little bit here. If you think about what you're experiencing now,
okay,
and you compare it to that original resource, are there any differences that we could pick up to make this even better?
In my resource state, I made the first move. Meaning I picked the choice and felt that was the best choice and went for it.
Okay.
Rather than improving my problem state and anticipating and having 3 or 4 choices, I was quicker to make the right choice and act on it. Right.
Okay, great. Back up the movie.
Okay.
Until it's ahead of time.
Okay.
So that you do whatever you did in that resource state of making the first move or whatever.
Right. Oh, I like that.
That's better, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, let's check again.
Okay.
Think again of the resource.
Okay.
And the state that you're in now. Is there anything in the resource that we want to borrow? Anything else? We've borrowed a lot already.
The light state, just light meaning feel good, like comfortable.
Okay. Can you bring in that lightness?
Yeah.
Lightness and airiness. Your feet lift off the floor a little bit or whatever. Okay. Anything else we could borrow from this resource state?
The deeper is like with emphasis. Like, yeah, I really mean it.
Okay.
That's all part of that resource state.
Okay. So add that in.
Okay.
Too.
On there.
Okay, great. And do you have any objections to having this new state available anytime
No.
you would need it?
No,
I wouldn't think so.
I think it's great.
Okay, last step then is imagine sometime in the future you encounter a similar situation, perhaps with that same person or that same kind of situation or the same kind of challenge that someone might make or that you might meet in real life or something. And close your eyes and just run a little movie associated, being inside it, of how you're going to respond to that with this state. Does that work out pretty well?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Complete shift.
Okay.
We moved into the resource state.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions of her? Save any questions for me about the process and so on. But do you have any questions about her and her experience, Mrs.
I have a question. When you were trying to be more resourceful in that problem situation in the future, did you feel a little worry or anxiety?
Well, that's part of that agitation.
No, I mean you were trying to be resourceful in the future, seeing yourself doing the right thing in the future.
This
No.
last
You did not still have any anxiety or...
No.
Okay.
Because what I did was exactly what we did. We went line item by line item. And so what I flipped it And piece by piece, I remodeled that situation. And so now, with the test, I went in there and no, I felt good. Actually, I'm now kind of looking forward to it because it's going to happen. I'm like, well, I'm ready now. And that's it. No, I didn't feel any of that trepidation. That's a good question, though. Mm-hmm. It is a good question.
Because I was trying to do it myself, but I got a little bit of anxiety.
Okay, well, then you would need a little more resource of some sort. I mean, think about it. Do you have anxiety when you reach for a doorknob to open the door? You're totally confident you can do it.
Right.
So you just do it. And if it's something maybe you're not totally confident about, then you might have a little excitement or a little bit of interest. Like you're going, oh, I can't wait for it.
Right. Come on, baby. Let's go.
Bring it on.
I'm ready.
And, you know, if in the past you've been in a situation where it has been difficult, then there's a little bit more anticipation. It's not like a doorknob that you've done thousands and thousands of times. So it's appropriate to have some little excitement or, wow, I want to see if I can do it. But with a sense of confidence that you can. And if you don't have quite all the resources you need, then you might still feel some anxiety. So, any other questions for her? Yes.
It seemed to me...
Let me get over here so I can get your question.
When you were going back, you said go back to the original, but each time you did that, it looked to me less intense each time you did it.
Does that fit with your experience?
It did, because I was listening to you, and I went from the blue, the black and white to the color. So when we built on that negative state, I couldn't really go all the way down to that negative state, like when I first got up here, because we were already adding to it. So it was hard for me to go back to that, because we had been building on it.
Right.
And that's correct. You picked up on that. I just didn't get back there again.
It wasn't the same.
No, because we kept building on it with the resources.
Yeah. It's kind of cheating a little bit what I did here. Because each time, as she says, each time that I suggest, well, just try this out and test it. Of course, I'm messing with this already. And her brain is going to go, ooh, I like that. And so it's never quite going to go back to the problem state. This is also a way to avoid, some people have sort of kind of test anxiety about this. They say, okay, we're going to transform a problem state into a resource state. And then they get all worried if they're going to do it right or something like that. By doing it one at a time and say, oh, we're just testing, it sets a different framer on what we're doing and allows me to do the same kind of thing without this difficulty that if she is some kind of, people have this thing about, I have to do it right. You've never heard about that one? Other people.
Yeah.
But then it takes all the heat off. I don't have to do it right. It's just testing. Oh, let's just find out what happens. And you can do the same kind of thing. So, yeah, that's a good point. And you can see it, right? Yeah, great. Okay, one more.
Okay, when you were thinking of the problem situation, you're thinking of one particular instance where you're having trouble with something. As you're going through changing the submodalities, did you find that you may be mapping over, it's like, I have a problem with Bill. Hey, I can use that with Gary too. Or were you just thinking that one particular?
That specific instance. Okay. The same players. I didn't change or go anywhere else.
Can you think of some other situation that's sufficiently similar that it would be useful to have this research?
Absolutely. And when you had asked me to identify the problem state, I went to the worst problem state that I have experienced. So now everybody else is going to be like, easy. Yeah. That's going to be nothing.
Now, this is a wonderful principle that she's enunciated very clearly. If someone has a group of experiences, all of which are difficult, let's say difficulties with authority or trying things out in a new situation or whatever it is, if you pick the worst one and you work with the worst one as she did, usually it will generalize to all the others. And for the same kind of reason she was saying, well, if I can deal with that one, the rest of these are a piece of cake, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll let you know in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, huh?
Right, well, that's when I go back to my life.
Oh, I see.
In 2 weeks,
okay.
when I get in that situation.
Give me a call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now just to review very quickly, and what I'd like to do is take any questions you have in sequence in terms of the particular process here. So, the problem state, think about that, calibrate to it. This is all in your notes. This is just a short form of it. Think of a resource state. calibrate to that. What does that look like when you see it from outside? Because you want to know that these things are working. And if you do the stuff that we do later, and the person's still like that, then that's not good news. That means you need to back up. Something else is happening. Weird. Contrast submodalities. You want the differences. You don't care about what's the same. You just care about what's different between the two. And usually there'll be at least a half a dozen differences. And one of them that is often significant, wasn't with her because she fully associated into each of them, is if you think about the two at once, one will be in a different location, and that can be a very useful difference. And, it wasn't appropriate for her, but it is for many, many people. So you get a list of differences, just as I did over here. Okay?
I have a question. When they are in different location, what you do?
Then you change the location.
Just change?
Well, you just change the one to the other. You don't change them both. Let's say this was the problem, and this was the resource. And at some point in the process, you take this content and just put it back in your memory or whatever. And you take the content of the problem state and literally put an image in that location, including distance, how far away is it, how large is it, and so on. Okay?
Is the resources and the problem state should be the same content?
Well, it varies. The question really is, do you think this resource would be useful in this situation?
Okay.
That's really the key question.
Okay.
Now, usually, if the content is similar, it will be better. But people divide the world in many different ways, and they generalize in different ways. And sometimes, for instance, with someone who has a very, very overactive conscious mind, I'm in charge, I'm the master of my fate, the captain of my soul, and I do everything intentionally, and so on, it can be useful to say, think of a resource that you think couldn't possibly work. And then get some bizarre resource from skiing or something which seems very, very far afield from the problem state, and it may be just the thing. Because they've already tried the things that they intellectually think would work, and they didn't work. So there are no real rules, but usually I would say pick a similar content. That if the problem state is difficulty with other people, then have a resource state in which other people are involved and it's going well. Usually, yes. And of course, if that doesn't work, then try something else. Okay? So, get the differences, and then testing differences one at a time. Take that problem state, make it brighter, make it color, speed up the tempo or whatever it is, then back it up. It's a way of sneakily moving on to this. At the same time, it's a way for you to get educated, because as the person changes those, you see the changes they go through with each one. You can detect which of them have more impact than the others. Maybe you'd like to start with those when you actually go down to this step. And sometimes you'll find that one sequence doesn't work very well and another does. Maybe making the sound panoramic first doesn't work well. But if you make the color change first, then you do the sound panorama, then it makes a big difference. So sometimes but you don't know what those are ahead of time, you just try it out. Then the actual mapping across, where you do all of them, you go down the list, and this can be very helpful if you use your hypnotic language pattern. Just allow that black and white to shift into color, allow that movie to speed up, blah, blah, blah. And do the map across. Any questions from here? I've gone on and not given opportunities for questions.
Maybe you can explain the color.
Explain which?
Map across.
Well, mapping across is simply I take the problem content and I put myself back in that situation. And one of the differences is black and white and color. So I see everything black and white, and I just gradually allow the color to come in. Allow it to become colorful and so on. You just kind of go through one at a time. And of course, if the person has difficulty, I can't really do that, then keep talking with that one before you go on to the next one. Or go on to the next one and then circle back and come back to the other one. Your goal is to match. You keep the content the same here. You don't change that. That's what people have been doing for hundreds of years. And it's a little bit Mickey Mouse. It's like making the world not the way it is. Whatever the difficulty is that Alicia was concerned with, that's a real difficulty. And those people are going to behave that way, or if there are people involved, whatever. And if you change that, then you go and you're prepared for something that isn't going to happen. And you're not prepared for what is going to happen. So you want to keep the content the same. Now, however, there's this one other thing. If you act resourcefully, and you do something different, they may do something different. But it's a result of what you do, not a result of your change. Someone over here had a question. Sounds good. Okay. So we've done the mapping across, and now you just want to test a little bit and adjust, as I did with her. You test by comparing what you've got now with the resource. Is there anything we missed back there? Is there any additional resource that we could bring in and make this even better? And if you need to make some adjustments, as I did with Alicia, that's great. And then future-based. Imagine some future situation where this kind of situation could occur, either with the same kind of person, or the same content, the same kind of challenge, whatever.
So eventually at the end, when you've done all the mapping across, you want them to associate with the previously unresourceful state before your future phase? Or is it okay to leave it undisassociated?
I'm having trouble finding words. When you have mapped across, you see, it could be that the resource state was dissociated. For her it was. Part of it was to pull back out of it and not be associated into it. So it's a dissociation within going back into that situation. So it's kind of a mix of association and dissociation. So whatever it is, when you get this mapping across to the resource, you use that state and then future pace that. When in the future might this happen again? And put yourself into it. Even if putting yourself into it means you're going to dissociate from it.
Okay.
Got it? It's a little weird.
Sure. So whatever the resource state was, if it was disassociated, then that's...
Then do that, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is. Because there are times when you're faced with a challenge, it's really useful to kind of pull back out of it a little bit and, okay, what are we going to do here? It can be very, very useful. You don't want to live your whole life dissociated, but very often in challenges and problem difficulties, it's really helpful to dissociate because you back up out of that emotional upset and that can subside a little bit and the brain can work a little better. People don't think very well when they're in a panic state. Their brains just don't work very well. Too much of the neurons are being used for fear or something like that. Any questions? Yeah.
I noticed you went back and forth when you were doing like, okay, what the unresourceful state was like this, what you see, then you went to the resourceful state.
Uh-huh. I want to contrast the two. This is gathering information?
Right.
Yeah.
On that part. Could you go down just the problem state, just stay there, and keep going down and then do the same one, or is it better than...
Got it. Well, you can do that, but if you do that, you get a lot of junk.
Okay.
You get a lot of stuff that are the same. So if you did problem state, associated, all this stuff, and you come over here, associated, you get a lot of things that end up crossing off.
Oh, okay.
So it's also easier to compare. If I were just to hold up a sheet of paper here and say what color it is, you could probably give me some kind of answer.
Yeah.
But if I show you this, two sheets of paper, and one's a light yellow and one's a slight orangey yellow, you can see it better. It's easier to see it whenever you compare two things. Red looks redder next to green, and green looks greener next to red. Our brains work by contrast. And so whenever you can create a contrast, it really makes the learning easier. It makes information gathering easier. And you almost always try to find some kind of contrast between the resource and the problem state, or something that works well, satisfying. If you did this with the geo, right? You did a contrast. A situation where things didn't go very well, what did you do? And another thing similar as possible, but it goes well. And you can really see the differences then, much more easily. Contrast is a wonderful way to teach and learn. Yes.
Do you find when you're using this with people that it folks actually have something you can write the differences on like that? Does it make it easier for them to see the contrast?
It can be. Sure. Can be. It's not required though. You can make your own little list and they're in your head. And then you just talk them through it. Usually that works fine. As long as you use their words. Okay, I think it's time for a quick break and exercise. And how about, it's 11:20 now, so let's do this in threes so that you have a chance to observe it as well. There's this wonderful thing of just being able to sit back and you have no responsibility either as a client or the person who's the guide. You can just kind of watch everything go down and you can offer the guide suggestions about how they might do things a little differently, a little more elegantly and so on. And we'll go to 12. It's your usual break time, right? And we will see you then at 1:30, right? So just go ahead and take a quick break, 5 or 10 minutes, and then go into the exercise. And I'll see you at 1:30.
Yes.
I just wonder, because I noticed like in all of us, the group, when we talked about the problem, was like it is out of focus, it is black and white, or it is far, it is whatever. Is it, because it is a problem, our mind make it like that, trying to forget, or it is the opposite? Yeah.
I don't know. So I'm more interested in what can you do to change things. So I'm a little less interested in how things came to be how they are. But I can tell you that it is typical that problem states are oversimplified. Tunnel vision. Many people, many problems that people have can be characterized as tunnel vision. You only see the problem. You don't see all this other stuff around you that you know or that you can do. It's like only this. And many, many problems are problems because you don't have the information that you need to solve them. And probably you have that information somewhere, but the way you're thinking about it doesn't allow you to do that. And so very often problem situations lack submodalities, or they're very simplified submodalities. Black and white and fuzzy and dim and blurred and tense, and it's like you don't have all your resources. Stage fright is a perfect example. Almost everyone can talk, they can form sentences, they can think, but somehow they get up in front of a group of more than 10 or 20 people and they can't do anything. You know they got the resources, but they don't have access to them. And this is a way of getting access to resources.
Okay, second question.
Okay.
From your experience, did you come across somebody who really cannot visualize or cannot, give it? Because I have a friend, like, when I talk about, like, what you're talking, it's nonsense.
Yeah.
So she always
some people don't visualize in consciousness.
Okay.
Even blind people visualize. You can see them, their eyes will go up like this. And just because they're blind, it doesn't mean that part of their brain died. Okay. The visual part of the brain is right at the back here. And they have images generated often from feeling. And then sometimes blind people get sight, and then they realize how bad their images have been, and they revise them based on visual information rather than just touch information. Hello? Cell phones off. Yes, go ahead.
Did you guys get to do it, Karen? We only got through 2, and I know a couple others.
Yeah, we
Okay.
didn't finish either.
Well, we have a choice then. Good, nice. Thank you for raising that. Would you like a little more time so that you can all do it? Okay. How much more time do you think you would need?
15 minutes, maybe.
Does that sound good? Okay. Great. Let's jam it. Let's do 15 minutes, then we'll start over again. Okay? Hello again. Now, did anyone not finish still? Not quite have time? Okay. Sometimes it just takes longer. Some people are more thorough than others, and it makes it take longer. So it's not something to be ashamed about. Okay? But if you do you have any questions about what to do to finish?
I don't think so. No.
I don't think so. Okay, good. Great. That's the basic. We always, in any kind of training, you have to cut some kind of mid-ground between doing it really, really thoroughly and boring some people, or not doing it quite so thoroughly but keeping everybody going and motivated and so on. And my goal is to teach you what to do. If you know what to do, I don't really care if you finish it in here. I hope you can do that at a study group or in an evening or something like that. Now, do you have any questions about what you did? How many of you did get a difference in location? When you changed location, did that have a lot to do with the making a shift, or a little, or in between?
A lot.
A lot, some in between. Location is a very powerful submodality, and I have an idea about why that's the case. It integrates all three major modalities. If you hear something, you hear it in a location. If you see something, you see it in a location. If you feel something, you feel it in a location. So location integrates all three major modalities, and I have an idea that's why location is such a powerful submodality. And sometimes you can just change location and everything else changes with it. All those other things. How many of you found that? Several. Okay, good. This means if you're doing something conversationally with somebody, like a boss, and you don't really have a license to kill, so to speak, a license to do therapy, you can say, well, how do you see that? And put let's say Ken is my boss, and I say, well, when you see your concerns about this future project that we're doing, blah, 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 where do you see that? Or you just look and see where he looks. He's got it over here. So I say, okay, now, those are valid concerns. Now, when you consider the advantages, if this project could really succeed, what are the advantages to this? Oh, they're over here, okay. So
That's interesting. Yeah, he was talking to me about something like that last weekend, and now I'm seeing how that works.
yeah, and then you can just, consider those difficulties. Those are important to really anchor. Those are really important to consider, because unless we take care of those difficulties, or those potential difficulties, we won't really have a chance of succeeding. Now, you see what I'm talking about? Now, that's using visual anchors and stuff like that, and I do it fairly clumsily because I'm usually a very straight-ahead guy, and I just go for it, and I don't usually try to do this covert stuff. But there are a lot of things you can do just with location. There's a buying location for almost everybody when they will buy something. But I'm not going to teach you about that. You'll find out about that yourself. Okay, I want to point out a couple of parallels between this and something you've already learned. If you recall change personal history, you have some kind of memory, it's a problem state. What kind of resource would be useful in transforming that and so on. Rather than do this, you just integrate them. Mapping across is a way to integrate. It's a way of integrating process. And one of the nice things about this is that you don't have a chance of integrating content. If you just have a problem memory and a resource memory and you integrate them, you may integrate on the basis of content as well as process. So it's a little sloppy. It's great, and it works. But this is a little more refined, and I like to know what I'm doing. I like to know the little bitty pieces. That's a personal preference. Some people don't like to do that. But it's really very parallel, and then, of course, test and future pace is the same in both. So basically, this is another way of doing change personal history. It's a little more detailed. You know a little bit more about what's going on because you've gathered a lot of information here. And sometimes that information tells you important things to do. There are several major patterns that my wife and I developed some years ago. One is for grief. And when you do grief, there are certain presuppositions you need to have in place. You need to do certain things in order to make the grief thing go. Forgiveness is another one we developed together in a seminar, together with a seminar. It was a modeling seminar, so we decided to model forgiveness, and the whole group, we modeled it all together. And in forgiveness, usually you have to deal with a whole lot of objections to doing it. The process is very simple, and it's basically mapping across. And in grief, it's also mapping across. But there's certain things you need to have in place in order to make it work. There's sort of larger frames around what you do. And then once those are satisfied, then the person's willing to map across and you're done. The doing is very simple. So what we're doing here is a very general form of this. We don't really know if that resource is the right or the best resource. And it might be that you went through this whole thing and it tests at the end and, well, it's a little better or something like that, but it isn't really, oh yeah. And that might mean that you need to go back and try a different resource. The resource you chose wasn't the best. But it doesn't take that long. Any questions about this before we move on? Yes?
Going back to reinforce the state, that was what I had to do, and it made the location thing a little tricky because I had already mapped it over.
Okay.
And then when I was trying to compare, you know, I was kind of like having to move it out of the way or reverse that step.
Well, you just have to go back in time. It's the easiest thing. Go back in time to before you moved it over. Usually that works. I mean, it's all hypnosis in a way. It's all crazy. But it's what we do. I mean, it's crazy enough to get us enraged at people and fall in love with people and all the other things that we do. But, you know, it's maps. We're dealing with maps here. Not the territory. But yeah, that can be a problem. It's not really a terrible problem because, I mean, it means that you're hard to get back to the old state. Right? Okay.
Can you flip-flop this technique for addictions and like...
Can I flip-flop it for addiction? I don't know what you mean by flip-flop.
For example, like someone really likes to smoke and they don't have anything bad to say about it. They just love cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
Then can you can you suggest to them to come up with a state that they just feel really disgusted and have them list all those attributes and then map it over on the cigarettes and see how that turns out?
I think I know what you're talking about. I'm not quite sure, but I don't think that usually works very well. There was a Schick method years ago where they taught people to lick out dirty ashtrays and things like that. And what you do, if you do that kind of work, what you do is you're creating conflict.
Okay.
And yes, you can get results that way. If you get a big enough punishment for doing something that overcomes the desire to do it, you can do it. I mean, punishment works. Not very well, but punishment can work as social control or as individual control. But it's at the cost always of being incongruent.
Okay.
And so what I always want to work for is congruence. And so I wouldn't work in that way. That's a very different thing here. Here you're just taking process submodalities, process elements, mapping them into a problem state. It gives you more information, it gives you more access to your resources. If people have all the resources they need, it's not always true, but it's often true. And there's one other thing I want to point out about submodalities. Submodalities have two fundamental functions. One is to draw your attention. You know, billboards or flashy stuff on TV and, you know, the fast-moving things and so on, the bright pictures. It draws your attention. Oh, wow. So it pulls you. The other is that it gives you more information. If you have a big picture, there's more to see. You can see more detail. You can literally, you know, whatever you know about a subject, in a large picture, you can display a lot of detail. In a small picture, you can't see it. In a faraway picture, you can't see it. In a close picture, you can see it. So there's these primarily these two functions. One is drawing attention. One is providing information. They do that simultaneously and to a greater or lesser degree depending on the context and the submodality.
In this situation, are there techniques to deal with that kind of situation?
Addiction?
If someone you love is doing a very destructive behavior, but they don't see it as being destructive.
Just slap their hands.
Okay.
No. Sure, there's all kinds of stuff on this, and this is actually what you'll be taking up following my 2 days. I have 2 days here. The next step is negotiation formats, reframing formats, ways to when people have two outcomes, how can you take those two outcomes that seem contradictory, it's this or this, I can't do this and have this, and find a way that they can move together and reach a common outcome that's satisfying to both. That's a very quick overview of what you'll get after this 2 days. And that's where this is really relevant. Because usually in any kind of addiction or compulsion, there's a lot of different motives. I mean, in cigarettes, you brought up cigarettes. Usually it's to take a break, to relax, to feel your lungs. The smoke goes in, you feel your lungs. Now that sounds bizarre to me as a non-smoker, but that's what I hear from people. There are a variety of social ease, being a part of the social scene. That's more true before. Now, if you smoke, you can be a pariah. At least in Colorado, you can't smoke anywhere in Colorado except outdoors. And it's cold in the winter. Anyway, there are typically a lot of different motives, and if you can find alternative ways of satisfying those motives that don't involve taking in the smoke and the poison and so on, that's fundamentally the way to go. And that way you don't build conflict. You have everything, oh yeah, this will satisfy this and this and this and this and this. And in any ideal negotiation between people, that's the case too. So that's kind of leading you into the next piece. Any other questions about what we did here? Okay. Well, the next topic is the phobia cure. It was one of Submodalities' first big successes. They didn't call it Submodalities back then. But it's a very powerful, it's very impressive usually because a phobia is one of the more intense experiences that someone can experience. They're totally freaking out. And I want to teach you a couple of pieces first before putting it all together. And I think I'll just do this as a group rather than having people up here. Close your notes. I don't want you to look at these right now. Put them down so that you don't have to balance anything on your lap. And I want you to think of some unpleasant experience, but something less than a phobia. So some memory that you still, I wish that hadn't happened that way. Is there anyone in here who can't find one? Oh, good. You're not broken yet. So you got some kind of unpleasant experience, and I'm assuming everybody in here can have some kind of visual representation of that. Does anyone have a problem with that? Okay, good. Now, what I want you to do is imagine you're sitting in a movie theater. Should be easier. You're sitting in chairs here, and I'm sort of the screen up here. And close your eyes. Imagine you're in a movie theater, and you see a still picture of yourself in that situation that was unpleasant, up on the screen, big screen, black and white, and you're sitting in the audience somewhere. And I want to give you maybe a minute to get that set up. Now, keeping all that intact, imagine that you float out of your body to a seat that's maybe 20 rows behind you or up in the projection booth, so that you can see yourself down in the audience, looking at that still picture of yourself in that unpleasant situation. Now, from that vantage point, do you have any significant feelings about that unpleasant situation? You can see it over there, but do you have any feelings about it? I see one head nod and several shakes. A couple of head nods. Okay, we'll go over this in a little more detail and try and take care of any thing that's not working. Here's a diagram. And how many of you did this easily and successfully, no problem. Okay, most of you. A couple of you not, and I'll get to you in a moment. Here's just a quick diagram. You're sitting in the audience here. You see your black and white still picture of yourself over here. And then you come out to this position. This is called a double dissociation or a three-place dissociation. There are 2 steps of dissociation, and there are 3 places. So it's a little confusing, but I'm kind of stuck with the lingo at this point. Now, you had difficulty, right? Can you tell me the difficulty?
Well, we did an exercise the other day on criticism.
Okay.
And I actually had to go back to the 4th position to disassociate myself.
Oh, you had to go to a 4th position. Okay.
So that 3rd position does not work for me.
And what makes it not work for you?
Because I can feel the pain that she's feeling about her.
Okay, got it. What if you put a piece of plexiglass here?
Yeah, that didn't work.
You didn't? Well, I've got one more thing to try. So there's plexiglass in front of you, and you put your fingers up on the plexiglass. You try that? Do it now. Can you feel it?
Yeah. I can feel it.
Can you feel that separation?
But we did it again. I
Okay.
had 2 pieces of plexiglass.
Okay. So you went back one more, huh? Okay.
And put another piece of plexiglass up.
Okay. And that worked.
That works.
Now, how come 2 works and 1 doesn't?
Because I'm completely cut off from the emotion from the second person. With 2
Okay. So what if you put a piece of plexiglass here?
Well, I could probably just leave it around. I don't know. I didn't do that.
Well, try it now. See, I'm curious because usually this is not required. It's okay if you find whatever works. I've got no argument with success, but I'm just curious. That's how I learn. If you imagine sitting in the theater first, and there's plexiglass in front of you, floor to ceiling, okay, and wall to wall, and then you go back to this position. Does that work? Interesting. What is there different about going back to this one here?
It's just one more removed. I'm watching her watch her get hurt.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it works. I'm just curious, and I didn't learn anything in this case, but that's why. And if you come up with something later, you go, oh, it's because of this. Please let me know.
More secure when she out.
More farther away?
Yeah.
Well, that could be too.
And
So,
I had to project it way out there. It had to be way out there.
okay, so you made this distance greater.
Right.
Fine. So you made this extra far. Wonderful. Those are adaptations of this work and this process. People are different, and some people need a little something fancier. Most of you, triple dissociation, no problem. Okay, now you had a problem too. Is that right? No.
Not with this.
What?
Not with this.
Not with this. Okay, great.
Just before when we did something similar, I didn't have a problem with it. With the situation, I still have a little bit of something right
A
here.
little something there.
Right.
Did you use some plexiglass?
No, I didn't.
Try that.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. Now let me try something else. You could do it again. And I'm going to gently move your head a little bit. Okay, so if you bring it back bring the chest like that. And keep your chin down. Yeah, like that. A little more, like that. Yeah, right there. Does that make any difference?
Yeah.
Does that make it easier to stay separate from that? Remember we had the submodality accessing cues earlier? And one of the ones for dissociation was this? Well, they run both ways. It runs in a circle. So you can actually modify the person's physical position to get them into that.
I don't necessarily have any feeling about what's going on the screen,
Uh-huh.
but when we were in the situation, I felt stronger about it than I thought I might.
Okay.
And it's like a lingering, but it's
Oh,
not
lingering.
It's
Okay.
not like I'm feeling something about that black and white picture with
Okay.
me in there.
Okay, it's a leftover.
Yeah, like a leftover.
That's another, you remember I mentioned that the kinesthetic system, particularly the evaluative system, has more duration. And so you can get into this kind of thing where there's, where you initially thought of this situation like that, and then you go through this all, but you still have that lingering sensation. Great. Okay, is there anyone else who had difficulties?
I found myself having to switch midstream to another situation because the first situation I was like, wait a minute, this is a situation that if I'm ever in again, I have to get the heck out, not sit there and go, oh, I'm trying to make myself feel comfortable. I really just have to get out of that situation.
Okay.
So then I had to choose another situation where it was more appropriate to try to feel comfortable, where it was actually, like the first situation, I thought, no, that the feelings that I have are very appropriate, and I should keep those feelings in that kind of situation.
Okay, wonderful. They're protective.
Right. And
Yeah.
so then I had to choose another situation where, now in this case, I can let go of those feelings.
Okay, so you had to switch content in the midstream.
And it was a little hard.
That's, so then it was fine. Is that right?
Yeah, then it was okay.
I mean, you had to switch horses in midstream,
Right.
but then once you got to the other side, you're okay. Now, I want to question this, well, let me start over. You say that in a future situation like this, you need to get out, you need to not just feel comfortable.
Right, so that those feelings are actually very appropriate in that
Right.
situation.
Now, the feelings are appropriate. I'm not arguing with the feelings. But if you leave the feelings over here, you can even act faster to get yourself out of the situation in the future. In other words, it's not an either or. Let me run it through it again. Let's say you're in some kind of situation of danger or serious, you don't want to be there.
Right.
Knowing that, you can represent that in the visual image and not have to represent it kinesthetically in bad feelings. And you can see her face over there going, or whatever, and know that this is a situation you need to get out of in a hurry and still feel comfortable. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, for the rest of you, this is one of those either or digitals. People often come up with this kind of thing. It's either this or this. And usually that's a lie. Or it's a mistake, let's say. Very often you can have this and this. And this is an example. Does that make sense to you? That feeling comfortable about that situation doesn't mean anything about not doing something about it, or not running away, or not screaming, or not, it doesn't mean anything about that. It just means that you don't have to be overwhelmed by feelings. Because if you're in a bad situation, you have overwhelmed feelings, usually your brain turns off. This is not the most creative moment for most people. And by learning how to see a situation dissociated like this, you can still represent, this is a bad situation, I need to get the hell out of here, etc., without having those horrible feelings. Okay? Okay? Any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. If one comes up later, let me know. And you still have a
I
question?
couldn't get the picture to stop moving.
Ah. Can you freeze it? Or imagine it in a projector and the projector stops?
Stops and then it starts moving again.
Okay, so you can't stop it, but then it starts
I can
again.
stop it, yeah, but it starts moving again.
And what do you think it keeps moving again? Ask the picture. Why do you keep moving?
Needs help?
It helps?
Needs help
It needs help in stopping?
to get out of the situation.
You want to get out of the situation. Okay. This stopping the picture is it's a first step on a way to get out of the situation. Knowing that, is it easier to stop the picture? Does that work better? Okay, this again is a little piece from what you'll get in the following section on reframing, where you actually engage in dialogue with parts of yourself. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit. Now, there's another way. There's always lots of ways. One of the things I love about NLP is that when you really learn a lot of this stuff, you go, well, I can do it this way, I can do it this way, I can do it that way. What if you just watch that moving picture again for a moment?
Moving?
Uh-huh. And then reach out and just grab a hold of it.
Just the picture, not the person.
Just the picture, yeah. The movie.
Okay.
And just stop it with your hands.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's lots of things to do.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. It's all crazy. But it's systematically crazy. I mean, think of this. How many of you have cell phones?
Cell phone?
Yeah. Do you know that the theories that make cell phones run are all crazy? They are. They talk about little particles running around through wires, and they jump across gaps, and their frequency distributions and all this stuff. It's all crazy. You know the only difference between a physicist and a card-carrying schizophrenic?
No. I was going to.
I don't either. No, there is one key difference. There's a key difference, and that is a schizophrenic is not willing to test his hallucinations. And the physicist desperately wants to test all his hallucinations. And they have people arguing now about multiple universes and the fact that our universe could have unfolded into 9 dimensions, but it stopped at 4, 3 spatial in one time, and why this happened. I mean, it's crazy, but it works. And that's what NLP is. It's crazy, but it works. Okay, anything else about the 3-place dissociation? Yeah?
What if sometimes you see black and white, but sometimes the color comes out?
The easiest thing to do is use a mini reference experience. Have you ever seen a color thing like this, and then it rains and washes all the color out? If you can pick some little experience that you can be pretty sure that someone has had, not a big long experience, just a little tiny one, and offer that to them. Oh yeah, I've done that. And they see the rain coming down and like that, it turns black and white. Okay? I mean, it's like holding something, you know? I mean, it's crazy to think about stopping a movie in your mind by reaching out into space, right? But it works. Because many times in her life, I'm sure, she's reached out to a child or a window shade that was blowing in the wind, and she grabbed it and it stopped. So it's a mini reference experience. It's a piece of neurology that you can access with the proper words. If I use the right words to elicit that experience, it's a resource in context. Oh yeah, I've had that experience. And whatever neurons are firing in your brain at the moment that you had that, you can utilize that and put it together with this movie that won't stop, and it will stop. I mean, maybe the first time you try something it doesn't work, but then you just try something else. Okay, any other questions about this piece? This is the fundamental piece in the phobia cure. You get this distance, the separation, make this a long, far away, make the screen smaller, and so on and so on. And then you can see the content, but you don't have to have the awful feelings, which are usually incapacitating. They're important. It's important to know what it is you don't like, what it is you want to not have happen again in your life, but it's not important to have that feeling kinesthetically. You can have it in the picture. You can have a grimace on the person's face. You can see them writhing in anguish without having to feel it. It's a matter of taking a representation and switching it into another representational system, another modality. Mm-hmm.
So what happens when triggers that would normally cause this phobia come up again? Is this the cure?
Well, when you do it right, and I'll do the whole process, and I'll demonstrate it. I want to teach you pieces of it, because otherwise it's too much to absorb all at once. It's easier to chunk it down into pieces. When the old triggers come up that remind the person of this incident, what they'll remember is the dissociated picture. And then they don't have to have the bad feelings. How many of you seen my Bee Lady video? Maybe sometime, there's in the box, I'm sure, is my Bee Lady video. It's now 23 years, and it's wonderful because she was totally skeptical. And I took her through the whole thing, and at the end I says, okay, that's all there is to it. And she laughs and laughs and laughs. She says, I'm glad I didn't pay for this. And she was totally skeptical, but totally cooperative. She was quite willing to go through the process. Now, a lot of people think you have to believe that something's going to work in order for it to work. How many of you believe in cell phones?
Believe they'll work.
Well, you believe that they'll work, but do you believe in the technology? I mean, you know that they work. And good technology works whether you believe it or not. You know, you could have somebody from some tribe in Africa or something, and they come over here and they say, cell phone, you go, ha, 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 and it'll